Okay, good afternoon, class. We are looking at cerebral malaria this afternoon. We'll start with looking at the objectives. And our objectives this afternoon are, at the end of the lecture or discussion, student nurses should be able to demonstrate an understanding of cerebral malaria and be able to manage the patient with cerebral malaria. Specific objectives, we are saying at the end of the discussion, we need to define malaria. We should be able to describe the pathophysiology of cerebral malaria. We should be able to state the signs and symptoms of cerebral malaria, then discuss the management and the complications of cerebral malaria. So, cerebral malaria is an arousable coma not attributed to any other causes in a patient with falciparum malaria, and this coma should persist for at least 30 minutes to an hour after generalized convulsion to make the distinction from the transient postictal coma. That is according to Cook and Zumler, 2009. So by definition, we are saying cerebral malaria is a complication of a type of malaria caused by a parasite called Plasmodium falciparum, characterized by impaired consciousness, delirium, abnormal neurological signs, convulsions, hyperthermia, and headache, presence of an arousable coma after exclusion of other encephalopathies such as hypoglycemia, bacterial meningitis, and viral encephalitis, and confirmation of falciparum infection. So what we are saying here is, for us to know that this is a cerebral malaria, we need to, patient needs to present with the impaired consciousness, delirium, abnormal neurological signs, convulsion, hyperthermia, and headache. And this also, the patient should be in coma in the absence of any encephalopathy. We need to exclude any encephalopathies such as hypoglycemia, bacterial meningitis, and viral encephalitis. And there should be a confirmed blood slide of Plasmodium falciparum infection. Okay, so we can conclude that this is cerebral malaria. So the pathophysiology of cerebral malaria, we are saying the basic underlying defect seems to be clogging of the cerebral microcirculation by the parasitized red cells. The parasitized cells develop knobs on their surface and develop increased cytoadherence properties, as a result of which they tend to adhere to the endothelium of the capillary and venules. So what are we saying? We are saying that when this cell is infected, has been infected with the parasite, the cell develop knobs on their surface, and this increases cytoadherence property, meaning the cells become adherent to each other. Okay, so this results in sequestration of the parasites in these deeper blood cells. Obstruction to the cerebral microcirculation results in hypoxia and increased lactate production due to anaerobic glycolysis. So when there is this adherence, the cells become adhered to each other. The result of this becomes sequestration of the parasites in the deeper blood vessels, and this causes obstruction to the cerebral microcirculation, which results into hypoxia and increased lactate production due to anaerobic glycolysis. The adherent erythrocytes may also interfere with the gas and substance exchange throughout the brain. And this increases cerebral anaerobic glycolysis, which interferes with the neurotransmission, causing impairment of cerebral function. Okay. So, what are the signs and symptoms of cerebral malaria? The signs and symptoms include the coma. So the patient will go into coma, and this coma lasts for 24 to 72 hours, initially rousable. So this patient will go into coma. But before this coma becomes arousable, we are told that the coma is rousable and then unarousable. A Glasgow coma scale of less than 7/15. So the coma will be first rousable and then unarousable. Impaired consciousness is another sign, meaning the patient may go to comatose. Then fever is due to the infection itself. The patient will have generalized convulsions and neurological abnormalities, and also delirium. Then mild neck stiffness may be seen. However, neck rigidity and photophobia and signs of raised intracranial tension are absent. So you realize that in cerebral malaria, photophobia may not be there. Okay, photophobia and also neck rigidity will not be there. So how do we diagnose cerebral malaria? One, we need a blood slide for malaria parasite, which will be positive. So when you take a blood slide to the lab for microscopy, that blood slide will show malaria positive. Then lumbar puncture will be done to rule out meningitis. Then random blood sugar will be done to rule out hypoglycemia. Then MRI to rule out encephalitis, blood for culture to rule out septicemia. Clinical picture may show impaired cerebral function. So that's how we make a diagnosis about cerebral malaria. Okay. Then, how do you manage this cerebral malaria? Okay. The treatment of choice today is artesunate. And when you look at artesunate, the presentation of this artesunate is injection lyophilized powder for reconstitution. So meaning this vial of artesunate needs to be reconstituted, and the presentation of this, it's in powder form, a vial containing 110 milligrams. Okay, so we look at the mode of action for this artesunate. Okay, we are saying the mechanism of artesunate is thought to involve cleavage of the endoperoxide bond through the reaction with the heme. So you not say that the blood contains the heme part. So it's this heme part which will be involved in the cleavage with the artesunate. Okay, this produces the free radicals which alkylate parasitic proteins. It has been shown to inhibit an essential parasite, calcium. So, the indication, who are eligible for this artesunate? So this artesunate can be given only in malaria. So in this case, in severe malaria, you give this artesunate. Okay. How about the dosage? How do you give this artesunate? The dosage of this artesunate is as follows. In an individual weighing less than 20 kgs, you give 2.4 milligrams per kg body weight IV or IM start. And this can be repeated after 12 hours and then 24 hours. So the first dose in someone with in someone weighing less than 20 kgs is 3 milligrams per kg body weight IV or IM. Then in someone weighing 20 kgs, more than 20 kgs, we are saying you give 2.4 milligrams per kg body weight. So you realize that in one weighing less than 20 kgs, the dosage is slightly higher than that which is, who weighs more than 20 kgs body weight. So you realize that in one who is weighing less than 20 kgs, we give 3 milligrams per kg body weight, and those weighing more than 20 kg, we give 2.4 milligrams per kg body weight. That is IV or IM start. And after that, you can repeat that dosage after 12 hours and then after 24 hours. And later on, you can continue once daily for 2 days. Okay. However, once patient regains consciousness, then the patient can start oral medication. Okay, you can discontinue artesunate IV or IM and start appropriate dosages of oral antimalarial drugs. Okay, so we are saying that each vial of 60 milligram injectable artesunate must be reconstituted with 1 ml of sodium bicarbonate, which is supplied with the vial. So this is the way you can reconstitute the artesunate. So you realize that in a package of artesunate, you have a vial containing 60 milligrams artesunate powder. Then in that you have another ampule of sodium bicarbonate, which is supplied together with that vial of artesunate. So after adding the sodium bicarbonate to the vial, shake for 2 to 3 minutes until solution is completely dissolved and clear. Okay. Then dilute the artesunate bicarbonate mixture with the 2 ml of 5% dextrose solution or normal saline 0.9%, that is sodium chloride. So you realize that in the package of artesunate, you have three vials. One for artesunate, the other one is for sodium bicarbonate, and the other one is either normal saline 0.9 or 5% dextrose. Okay, so calculate the appropriate dosage. So the dose, if one is weighing more than 20 kg, the dosage is 2.4 milligrams per kg body weight, or 0.12 mils per kg body weight. So you round off to the nearest. So meaning when you round off this figure to the nearest, you have 0.2 mils per kg body weight. Okay. So withdraw appropriate dose in syringe and inject slowly into the large muscle. Inject into the upper outer quadrant of the bottle. Okay. So that's how you inject. So for the dosage schedule for injectable artesunate, we are saying dosing schedule is as follows. Artesunate 2.4 milligrams per kg body weight, and that's for those that are weighing more than 20 kg, or 3 milligrams per kg body weight for those that weigh less than 20 kg, can be given intravenously on admission. That's it. The time there, it's 0. When you give at start, when you are admitting the patient, then you record time 0. Then after 12 hours, you can repeat the dose, and thereafter, after 24 hours, you give another dosage. Then once a day until patient is able to take orally, oral medication that is. Then when patient is able to take oral medication, complete the treatment by giving a full course of the first line treatment for uncomplicated malaria. You note to say that when you are giving artesunate, the patient was considered to be critically ill, meaning that was a severe. Now this patient has stabilized. You need to switch from artesunate to oral medication, and you give an appropriate oral medication. In this case, appropriate oral medication is Coartem. You can give Coartem. Okay. So also Coartem is dependent on the age. Okay. So you can give Coartem according to the age. So let's look at the side effects of this artesunate. So artesunate is very well tolerated with a few drug-related side effects. Drug interaction through the cytochrome P450 system are possible, but no serious interactions have been noted. The side effects from the artesunate class of medication are similar to the symptoms of malaria. So you realize that those reactions, adverse reactions of artesunate, they are also similar to those of malaria. And these include nausea, vomiting, anorexia, and also dizziness. And mild blood abnormalities have also been seen in this adverse reaction of artesunate. Okay. Then the other drug that you can use is quinine. The presentation of quinine is in tablet. It comes in tablet form of 300 milligrams or injectable form of 300 milligrams per ml ampule of 2 ml. So when it's an injectable, you note that it comes as an ampule, and this ampule contains 300 milligrams of, it's 300 milligrams of quinine per ml, and it's 2 ml. The ampule contains 2 ml. Okay, so the mode of action for quinine, we are saying the mechanism of action is interference with the parasite's ability to digest hemoglobin. So how this quinine works is it interferes with the parasite's ability to digest hemoglobin. Okay. Sorry, just a bit. So quinine interferes with the parasite ability to digest hemoglobin. Then quinine and quinidine also inhibit the spontaneous formation of the beta hematine. These are hemozoin or malaria pigment, which is a toxic product of digestion of hemoglobin by the parasite itself. So quinine will inhibit the spontaneous formation of beta hematine, which is a toxic product of the digestion of hemoglobin by the parasite. Okay, so what is the dosage for quinine? So also dosage for quinine is dependent also on the body weight. So we are saying that when given intravenously, a loading dose of 20 milligrams per kg body weight can be given in 1 liter of 5% dextrose as a loading dose, infusion for 4 hours. Then patients rest for another 4 hours. So you alternate in this when administering IV quinine. 20 milligrams per kg body weight is a loading dose given intravenously. And this is supposed to be infused in 1 liter of 5% dextrose. And this should be given in 4 hours. Then after that finishes in 4 hours, then the patient can rest for another 4 hours before you start another infusion of quinine. Okay, followed by a maintenance dose. So after that, the patient rests for 4 hours, then a maintenance dose of 10 milligrams per kg body weight in 5 mils of 5% dextrose can be given in 8 hours. Okay, it can be given in 8 hours. Then when the patient stabilizes, the condition of the patient stabilizes, we are saying you can commence oral quinine can be given. And this oral quinine in children, it's still dependent on the kg body weight. That is, you give 10 milligrams per kg body weight 3 times a day for 5 to 7 days. Then in adult, you give 600 milligrams. In adult, you give 600 milligrams per 3 times a day for 5 to 7 days. Okay. So in adult, it's 600 milligrams. Then in children, it depends on the body weight, and that is 10 milligrams per kg body weight. Okay. What are the side effects of this quinine? So, side effects of quinine include the chinchonism, which is a ringing sound of the ear, or tinnitus. Okay, so when one is on quinine, one will complain of a ringing sound in the ear. Okay, then there will be hearing loss, nausea, uneasiness or restlessness, tremors, blurring of vision, hypoglycemia, cardiovascular and neurologic toxicity, which is rare. So cardiovascular and neurologic toxicity is a rare condition or a rare side effect in quinine. But the most common is hypoglycemia. Okay? Hypoglycemia. So, drug interaction. So, which drug can interact with the quinine? There is no non-severe interaction with the other drug. Okay. So, when giving this drug, the nursing considerations when giving this drug. Okay. So when giving this drug, you need to monitor closely the patient with diabetic mellitus when administering the drug. Monitor the blood sugar levels, as both the drug and the condition, which is diabetes, can induce hypoglycemia. So when you are treating malaria in a patient with diabetes, you need to be conscious when giving a quinine. Okay. Then supportive treatment can be given. Analgesics, such as analgesics and antipyretics like paracetamol, can be given. So the presentation of this paracetamol is 100 milligrams and 500 milligrams jam, or it comes in liquid form as 125 milligrams per 5 ml. So in a 5 ml liquid, paracetamol is 125 milligrams there. Then what is the mode of action of this paracetamol? Okay, so the mode of action is unknown, but thought to produce analgesia by blocking the generation of pain impulses probably by inhibiting prostaglandin synthesis in the central nervous system, or the synthesis or action of other substances that sensitize pain receptors to mechanical or chemical stimulation. So it is thought to relieve fever by central action in the hypothalamic heat regulation center. Okay. So we are saying it is thought to relieve fever by central action in the hypothalamic heat regulating center. Okay. So the dosage, how do we give this how do we administer this paracetamol in children? In children, we are saying paracetamol, you can give 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams 3 times daily in children for 3 days, okay? 3 times daily for 3 days. And in adult, you can give the dosage of about 500 to 1,000 milligrams 3 times daily for 3 to 5 days, okay? Depending on the fever, okay? Depending on the fever. So, what are other drugs that can interact with the paracetamol? We are saying barbiturate, carbamazepine, rifampicin, and also sulfapyrazone. When administered in high dose or long-term use of these drugs may reduce the therapeutic effect and enhances the hepatotoxic effects of acetaminophen. So avoid concomitant use. So we are saying that these drugs, the effect of these drugs, they can cause hepatotoxicity, which is also the side effect of Panadol. So when you are administering these drugs, you need to be wary of the effect, okay? And also you need to avoid administering them concomitantly, okay? Nursing consideration. So what do you need as a nurse to consider when giving this drug? We are saying use consciously in patients with a chronic history of alcohol abuse because hepatotoxicity may occur after therapeutic doses. And also, you need to know that acetaminophen may interfere with certain laboratory tests for urinary 5-hydroxyindoacetic acid. It may also produce false positive decrease in blood glucose levels in home. Okay? So that's how this supportive drug can be given. We have a lot of drugs that can be given, and those may be given as an symptomatic treatment. For example, when the patient is convulsing, you can give diazepam, okay? Depending on the age, you can give 5 milligrams, okay? 5 milligrams of diazepam. It's important to note that diazepam, when given in a low dose, it's a laxative, a tranquilizer. Okay. So to relax the patient, to avoid treat convulsions, then you can also give diazepam. Okay. Then you can also give oxygen, administer oxygen 2 to 5 liters per minute may be given. And this may be given in cases of dyspnea. When the patient has dyspnea, you can give 2 to 5 liters of oxygen. Then we can also give, as condition improve, patient may be given the following: folic acid 5 milligrams OD for 14 days, and also antiemetics. Here you need to avoid giving ferrous sulfate, as the malaria parasite will feed on the folate itself. Okay, so the ferrous sulfate should not be given, and this may interfere with the treatment, as the folate may give strength to the malaria parasite. Then also, Multivit 2 tablets BD for 7 days can also be given. This will stimulate or prevent the anorexia, the loss of appetite. Okay. Then the nursing care. We look at the nursing care. So we are saying meticulous nursing care is the most important aspect of management in this patient. So you need to maintain a clear airway. But air pattern needs to be cleared. Okay. In case of prolonged deep coma, endotracheal intubation may be indicated. Also, turn the patient every 2 hours. This turning of the patient 2 hourly, you need to turn in order for you to prevent the development of pressure sores. Okay. Then avoid soiled and wet beds. This will help to prevent bed sores and also promote circulation, blood circulation. Then I'll place the patient in a semi-recumbent position as the patient is in comatose, to reduce the risk of aspiration. Okay. Then you need to insert a nasogastric tube. This nasogastric tube you insert, it's for you to do aspiration to prevent aspiration pneumonia. As the patient is in comatose, then there is a likelihood that this patient may inhale some vomiters. And for you, you insert a nasogastric for you to aspirate and prevent aspiration pneumonia. I also maintain strict intake and output record. So whatever fluid, whatever you give the fluid, the patient, you need to take note of that and record. And also, you need to record whatever the patient void. Okay, that is, you need to catheterize the patient for you to monitor the fluid output. You also need to monitor the vomiters for the amount, for you to note the amount of output. Okay. Also observe the observe the color of the urine. Is it highly colored or black urine, to monitor or determine the complications that may arise. As one of the complications for malaria is it's black water fever. So you need to monitor the urine for color and if it's black or high colored. Then monitor vital signs every 4 to 6 hours. You need to monitor the vital signs, the temperature, to monitor the infection, whether it is reducing or it's worsening. The vitals like pulse, BP, you need to monitor those for you to be sure of the cardiovascular function. Okay. Also observe for any changes in the level of sensorium. Occurrences of convulsions should also be observed. If the temperature is above 39 degrees Celsius, you do tepid sponging and also fanning may be done. You can open the nearby windows, give warm drinks. Those will help to reduce the temperature. Okay. Then serum sodium concentration, arterial carbon dioxide tension, blood glucose and arterial lactate concentration should also be monitored frequently. As you know that this patient is maybe on quinine and also may not be taking enough food, you realize that the concentration of nutrients in the blood, nutrients like glucose, may be low, so you need to monitor those. Then also you can intervene when such arises. Okay. So what are the complications? Complications for cerebral malaria. One, you know to say that malaria destroys the hemoglobin, which are the red blood cells. Hence, you need to be wary of anemia. One of the complications of malaria or cerebral malaria is anemia due to lysis of the red blood cells. Okay. Then the other complication is pulmonary edema due to accumulation of fluid in the lung as one is in coma. So you realize that when one is in a coma, is unable to cough, or maybe the cough reflexes have gone down. Hence, there will be fluid accumulation in the lungs, and this accumulation of fluid may cause pulmonary edema. And also, coma may come in due to brain involvement. Okay, you find that this is cerebral malaria and the parasite has gone into the brain, and when the brain is involved, then the patient may go into coma. Then hepatosplenomegaly. Hepatosplenomegaly, it's due to massive breakdown of these red blood cells, and there will be cytoadherence to each other, to these cells. Hence, these will result into hepatosplenomegaly due to destruction of the red blood cells. So those are the complications that may arise from cerebral malaria. In summary, to wind up, we are saying Cerebral malaria is a condition in which there is an arousable coma in a situation of unknown causes. This comes as a complication of malaria. So this means that if the parasite gets access to the brain, resulting into altered levels of consciousness. This can be treated by both antimalarial drugs and also antibacterial. You can give antibacterial to prevent the secondary infection, okay? Secondary infection that may set in, you give antibacterial drugs. So, in a nutshell, that's a cerebral malaria. Okay. End of our presentation.